The moment the blade tore through his leg, Marcus Jalen knew two things. First, that he'd never trust a Lokari anti-grav lift again, and second, that he was going to need stitches. Real ones. Not the regenerating gel packs the aliens used like miracle potions, but a needle and thread, because this was going to be one of those injuries where old-school human stubbornness had to take over. He hit the floor of the cargo bay with a grunt, clutching his thigh just above the knee. Blood pulsed through his fingers in rhythmic bursts, hot and fast. The pain was so sharp it nearly blacked out his vision, but he stayed conscious long enough to hear the panicked flapping of feet. "Marcus, you are losing vital fluids." The voice was shrill, but not cruel. It belonged to Yelix, the Lokari student assigned to Earth-Human Integration Studies. It had 6 limbs, a translucent blue exoskin, and a voice like an old intercom. "You require immediate stabilization. You are dying." Marcus gritted his teeth. "I'm not dying," he rasped. "But I will if you keep yelling and don't get me a medkit." Yelix's eyes, 3 of them blinked in rapid succession. It crouched, examining the wound with trembling appendages. "The tissue is compromised. There is arterial bleeding. This is terminal without immediate medical intervention." "I said get me the medkit," Marcus groaned, trying to keep pressure on the gash, "and find me a needle and thread." Yelix froze. "Needle and thread? What primitive—" "No, that cannot close an arterial rupture. That is not medically sound." "Just do it." Yelix scrambled out of the bay, knocking over a crate of nutrient vials. Marcus tried to breathe slow. The blood was still flowing, but the pressure helped. He peeled back the torn leg of his uniform. The cut was deep, probably 6 inches long and jagged, like the edge of a broken bottle had kissed his thigh. Muscle was visible. It wasn't pretty. The accident had happened during a maintenance training. The Lokari used anti-grav lifts to move heavy cargo, but they didn't account for human reflexes or limb placement. The lift had jammed, then dropped suddenly. The corner of a metallic crate caught Marcus on the leg as he dodged backward. He hadn't even screamed, just dropped. Yelix returned, panting, carrying a silver medkit and a sealed pouch. "I found a sterilized sewing kit from your emergency supply cache. This is madness. You require biofoam and neural inhibitors." "No biofoam," Marcus said, pulling the kit toward him. "It doesn't work well on human connective tissue. We've tried. But the pain. I'll deal with it." He snapped open the medkit, tore open a packet of antiseptic, and hissed as the sting bit into the wound. Yelix watched in horrified fascination as Marcus threaded the needle with shaking fingers. Sweat poured down his face, and his hands were still slick with blood, but he worked methodically. "You are performing self-suturing," Yelix said, crouched beside him. "This is not protocol. Neither is bleeding out on a cargo deck." The first stitch made him scream. Not loud, but enough to echo through the bay. He bit down on his sleeve and pushed through. 1 stitch, then another. The needle passed through skin and muscle like it was fabric. Crude, but effective. After the 7th stitch, Marcus's vision swam. He paused, panting. "You need assistance?" Yelix said. "Then hold the skin together. Here, with those, whatever you call those fingers. They are manipulation digits." "Great, manipulation." Yelix obeyed, trembling. Marcus finished the last 3 stitches slowly. Blood still seeped out, but no longer in pulses. He tore open a butterfly strip packet and pressed them down over the wound. Not perfect, but it would hold. He leaned back, chest heaving. "Okay, now you can call medical." "I already did," Yelix said. "They are en route. Marcus, your actions were reckless. You could have gone into hypovolemic shock." "I didn't. I'm here. And now I need to lie down." Yelix helped him onto a stretcher just as the med team arrived. 2 humans, one from Earth's embassy, and a Droxian trauma nurse. They took over quickly, checking vitals, starting fluids. "Why didn't you call us immediately?" the human medic, a woman named Petra Norel, asked. Marcus groaned. "Had to stop the bleed first." Petra examined the stitches. "You did this yourself?" "Yep." She didn't say anything else, just nodded once. "Let's get you to the infirmary." The trip was a blur. The painkillers kicked in halfway there, and Marcus slipped into a fog. He woke up 3 hours later in a sterile med bay, his leg elevated and wrapped tight. Jalen sat nearby, unusually quiet. "Hey," Marcus whispered. "You are not dead." "Nope. You sewed yourself together." "Told you I would." Jalen stood, pacing. "I have reviewed hundreds of human medical files, but none suggested that a person would attempt such a primitive act on themselves. Why would you not wait for assistance?" "Because I didn't have time. If that artery opened more, I'd have bled out before help arrived. But you subjected yourself to intense pain. You risked infection, shock, unconsciousness. Risk was better than waiting." Jalen stopped. "Is this common among your species?" "No," Marcus said. "But it's not rare either." 2 days later, Petra returned to change the dressings. The wound was healing clean and no signs of infection had appeared. Marcus was still on crutches with orders to keep weight off the leg. The muscle would take weeks to fully recover. "You'll need physical therapy," Petra said. "And next time, don't play surgeon." He nodded, wasn't playing. Jalen hovered nearby. "I have submitted a report to the Lokari Medical Board. They are alarmed. Let them be. They want to study the thread technique." Marcus laughed, then winced. "Tell them it's not a technique, it's survival." Later that week, Jalen brought him a gift. A Lokari-grade needle set, upgraded with human-compatible materials. "I do not condone your methods," Jalen said, "but I acknowledge their efficacy, and I now understand that adaptation is not always logical. Sometimes it is simply necessary." Marcus took the kit, turning it over in his hands. "Thanks, but I'd rather not use it again." "Agreed." The wound healed slowly. After 10 days, the stitches were removed. Petra checked the muscle response and cleared him for light walking. The butterfly strips had helped keep the skin closed, reducing scarring. Jalen witnessed every step of recovery, recording details, asking questions. By the 3rd week, Marcus walked without assistance. The leg still ached, but he could move. Jalen stopped doubting his survival. At the graduation ceremony for the integration program, Jalen was asked to give a speech. It paused midway, looked at Marcus in the front row, and said, "There are lessons the stars cannot teach. Only blood, grit, and thread can show us those." Marcus smiled, still limping. He wasn't proud of the pain, but he was proud of what it meant. No one questioned human resilience again. By the 4th week, Marcus was cleared for low-impact duties and reassigned to the diplomatic support wing aboard the ECV Halbert's Wake, a cross-species embassy vessel orbiting the neutral moon of Koresh. The medical clearance came with strict parameters: no combat drills, no mechanical maintenance requiring crouching, and definitely no heavy lifting. Marcus agreed to all of it, mostly because the alternative involved being shipped back to Earth for mandatory convalescence, which sounded like a slow death in paperwork. The Halbert's Wake was a floating bureaucratic beehive, a kilometer-long station converted from an old mining rig. Its corridors still smelled faintly of oxidized metal, despite 2 decades of atmospheric scrubbers. 94 species shared the station's halls, some with exoskeletons that clicked like wind chimes, others that moved in oily ripples. Marcus stuck out as always tall, bipedal, and alarmingly expressive. He'd once been told by a Grell negotiator that his face contained too many moving parts to be trustworthy. At precisely second cycle midpoint, somewhere between local noon and Earth afternoon, Marcus was tasked with escorting a new delegation of Vexari to the Cultural Exchange Chamber. The Vexari were recent additions to the Galactic Accord and notoriously cautious. They resembled upright stingrays, their bodies tapering into long, ribbon-like tails, with a skeletal shimmer that flickered when they were agitated. The lead Vexari, identified as Envoy Rexun, floated beside Marcus in near silence. Vexari communicated through pulses of bioluminescent flashes, translated in real time through an embedded drone that hovered behind Rexun's dorsal ridge. "You are the human who performed self-repair with needle and filament," the drone intoned. Marcus didn't slow his pace. Word travels fast. The Locari have distributed footage to the Accord's medical archive. Of course they have. There is confusion, the drone continued. Our physicians believe it a fabrication. No species with pain receptors intact would perform such an act willingly. I didn't enjoy it, if that's what you're wondering. Resume pulsed a series of violet and green flickers. The drone interpreted after a beat. You lack regenerative capability. Your tissues do not reform without external aid, and yet you restored continuity by force. I didn't have many options. The Vexari envoy rotated midair, studying Marcus's gait. You now walk on the injured appendage. There is no mechanical enhancement? Nope. That is statistically improbable. Marcus reached the chamber doors and keyed in the unlock sequence. Get used to improbable, that's kind of our thing. Inside, the cultural chamber was a mess of overlapping aesthetics. One wall was textured in Lurathi sandbark, another lined with transparent aquatic columns for the visiting amphorids. A low table at the center held a rotating spread of preserved delicacies, none of which resembled food in the traditional sense. The Vexari glided toward the far end while Marcus took a seat against the wall, stretching the healing leg cautiously. A few minutes later, Yilix entered, trailed by a pair of Undari scholars. It no longer needed to accompany Marcus, but chose to anyway, citing continuing observational interest. The Undari whispered among themselves, their skin shifting from pale copper to a soft pink shade, a sign of intellectual curiosity in their species. One of them, taller than the other and draped in a robe of woven synth silk, squinted at Marcus. We have read the translated report. You used a curved metallic implement to bind torn tissues? That's right. Why not induce comatose state to suppress pain impulses? No time. And I didn't have the gear. The other Andari leaned forward. You chose consciousness during invasive trauma? Marcus nodded. Didn't have a choice. Yilix interjected. He refused neurochemistry regulation, claimed he would deal with it. The taller Andari tapped a claw against its own chin. Fascinating. Voluntary nociception retention. That's a new one. Marcus stood with a slight grunt and moved toward the exit. Glad to be your science project. Later that day, around early third cycle, Petra Norel appeared in the administrative wing, holding a handheld scanner and a frown. You've been walking without the brace again. Marcus leaned against the wall, arms folded. Didn't need it. I'm not running laps. You're not supposed to stand that long yet. You've got inflammation in the peroneal tendon. He shifted weight to his other leg. It's manageable. Petra rolled her eyes and scanned his leg anyway. You're getting micro tears. Keep at it and they'll become full tears. Then you're back in bed for another month. Understood, doctor. I'm not just saying that because I like negging. You push too hard and your body will push back harder. I'll take it easy. She didn't believe him, and he knew it. By the 6th week, Marcus was pulled into an emergency summit involving a minor incident between the Trio and the Kari. The Trio, gelatinous thinkers from a gravity-heavy world, had accused the Kari of intellectual theft after a shared symposium on nanostructure memory mapping. No one else volunteered to mediate, so Marcus, who had no background in neural tech, was handed the assignment because, as the chief diplomat put it, you're the only person both sides haven't insulted yet. The meeting was held on Deck 12, in a chamber usually reserved for trade negotiations. Marcus arrived early, trying not to limp. The Kari ambassador, Reshin, entered first, sleek and gliding with the elegance of a predator at rest. You are the one stitched by hand, Reshin said without preamble. Still am. Your kind performs injury rituals to demonstrate dominance? No, we survived them. The Trial diplomat arrived moments later, gurgling through a translator unit embedded in its base. We object to the presence of a non-neural specialist. Marcus gestured to the empty chairs. You can object from a seated position. They complied, reluctantly. The argument that followed was dense, technical, and filled with interjections about quantum entanglement patents and structural design mimicry. Marcus said little for the first hour, absorbing the rhythm of their conflict. When the conversation looped for the 3rd time over data access logs, He raised a hand. Can either of you definitively prove who originated the protocol? Both were silent. Then we're not talking about theft. We're talking about simultaneous discovery. It happens. The trio rippled in disapproval. That is statistically unlikely. Sure, so's walking on a leg that was nearly sliced open 6 weeks ago, but here I am. Reshin's tail flicked once. You equate pain endurance with conflict resolution? I'm saying improbable things happen all the time. The trick is accepting them without assuming someone cheated. The trio paused. We will consider joint authorship. Reshi nodded. Acceptable, provided priority listing is alphabetically reversed. They both left without another word. As Marcus exited the chamber, Yelex was waiting. You used your injury as leverage. I used it as proof that sometimes the universe doesn't care about your odds. Yulex's head tilted. I have begun reevaluating our survival models. That's dangerous thinking. I know. That evening, Marcus sat alone in the observation lounge, leg propped on a cushioned table, a glass of electrolyte mix in hand. The stars outside didn't blink. They burned steadily, indifferent to the tiny dramas below. Petra joined him without asking. Your tendon's less irritated today. Didn't do much walking. Progress, then. They sat in silence for a while. You ever think the galaxy's just watching us to see what we'll do next? Marcus asked. Probably. Humans are the only ones who think pain is just another obstacle. He sipped his drink and stared out at the void. Then I guess we better keep surprising them. By the end of the 7th week, Marcus could jog short distances without feeling like his leg was going to come apart. Petra cleared him for light endurance runs under 5 minutes at a time, nothing involving stairs or uneven surfaces. He kept to the guidelines, mostly because she threatened to revoke his clearance if he didn't. Besides, running through the halberd's wake was a logistical nightmare. The station's layout wasn't designed for cardio. At early rotation, he was asked to accompany a team of Zentari engineers to the lower comms array. The Zentari were a photosynthetic crustacean species with a talent for signal harmonics. They were also deeply wary of humans, citing a case file involving a misplaced fusion battery and an accidental broadcast of human children's programming across their sleep cycle frequencies. Marcus had nothing to do with it, but guilt by species was common enough. The lead engineer, Glar, had a shell like polished obsidian and moved with a twitchy economy. Its translator device was embedded in its thorax and produced speech in clipped bursts. You will not touch the core panel. Wasn't planning to. You will remain no closer than 2 steps from the modulation coils. Understood. You will not speak unless asked. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That one's negotiable. Glare's antennae retracted slightly. Humans are unpredictable. Your internal systems are inefficient. You persist despite design flaws. I'll take that as a compliment. They descended through a narrow vertical shaft, lit only by emergency phosphors. The station's gravity was stable, but the climb still required more leg strength than Marcus liked. He didn't complain. Instead, he used the time to study the way Glar adjusted its tools, each one manipulated by a limb that folded and unfolded like an origami crane. The Zentari's armor plating flexed subtly, absorbing and redirecting ambient charge. At the bottom, the comms array loomed. It was a jungle of fiber mesh and shielding plates, with a central tower that pulsed faintly with biosignal traffic. The issue was a misalignment in the signal dampener. Glare began recalibration while Marcus monitored the diagnostics feed. Halfway through the procedure, the system let out a sharp tone, followed by a spike in the console's thermal reading. Something's overloading, Marcus said. Glare spat a series of clicks. You moved. I didn't touch anything. Your presence altered field balance. You emit unstable heat. Marcus crouched, watching the readout scroll. No, it's the secondary coil. It's drawing too much current. You are not certified? I can still read a stress curve. Glare hissed. Then prove it. Marcus stepped forward, ignoring the ache in his thigh. He tapped the console, adjusting the gain manually. The spike evened out. Glare watched without comment. After another 10 minutes, the recalibration completed, Glare stood, tools folding neatly into its carapace. You reduced error margin by 7%. Next time, just ask for help. We do not ask. Then learn. They rode the lift back up in silence. Marcus's leg throbbed steadily, but he ignored it. 2 hours later, he was in the hydroponics bay, checking on a batch of Earth-native tomatoes that had been introduced for cross-adaptability testing. Yilix appeared suddenly from behind a rack of nutrient mist lines. "You are scheduled for rest." "Just stretching my leg?" "You are using agricultural labor as a form of recovery therapy?" "Something like that." Yilix examined the tomato vines. "These fruits contain seeds. You consume them whole?" "Usually. Sometimes we puree them, cook them down." "That is inefficient. Why not extract nutritional compounds directly?" "Because we like the taste?" Yilix blinked. "Taste is subjective. Nutrition is objective." Marcus plucked a ripe tomato and bit into it. "And sometimes both matter." Later that cycle, a small delegation from the Curel Union arrived for a tour of Halberd's wake. The Curel were known for their bureaucratic rigor and absolute adherence to protocol. They requested a demonstration of human adaptability in high-pressure scenarios, citing a recent interspecies forum that had questioned humanity's long-term viability. Petra intercepted Marcus in the corridor. "You're on the list for the demonstration." "Wait, me?" "Because you're the only one who's both medically cleared and stupid enough to agree." 30 minutes later, Marcus stood in a pressurized containment lab, facing a simulation pod configured for hull breach response. The chamber would vent a controlled burst of atmosphere, trigger a decompression alarm, and require manual override of the emergency seal. It was a standard test, but the Curel had added one detail. The participant had to perform it with a simulated fracture. A technician strapped a pain simulator to Marcus' forearm. He flexed his fingers. The device jolted his nerves with a blunt, stabbing ache every few seconds. "This thing accurate?" "Too accurate," Petra said. The test began. The alarm shrieked, lights strobed, and a red warning banner scrolled across the display. Marcus moved quickly, favoring his leg slightly, using only his left hand to unfasten the override panel. The simulated pain made his vision blur, but he didn't stop. He located the manual release and twisted it hard. The chamber hissed as the seal engaged. The lights cut out. The alarm fell silent. He exhaled slowly. His arms still throbbed. The Curel observers filed notes silently. One of them, a thin, slate-colored being with segmented eyes, approached after the debrief. "You experienced simulated trauma to 2 limbs. You completed the task in under-regulation time. Guess I'm just efficient." "It is not efficiency, it is disregard for personal limitation." "Maybe, but the breach got sealed." That night, Marcus sat in the galley, knee wrapped in a compression sleeve, eating a bowl of reheated lentil stew. Yilix arrived carrying a stack of data slates. "I have compiled a report." "On what?" "Human decision-making during impaired physical operation." Marcus gestured to the seat across from him. "Go on." "You prioritize outcome over comfort. You ignore biological warning systems. You adapt by default, even when adaptation is harmful." "Sounds about right." "Your species is not designed for survival. We weren't, so we made ourselves that way." Yilix paused. "I have completed my observational term. I must return to Lokari Prime." Marcus set his bowl down. "So this is goodbye?" Yilix's arms twitched. "I have submitted a thesis titled, 'Resilience Without Reason, the Human Model of Adaptive Suffering.'" Catchy. "I included the leg injury and the butterfly strips." Marcus laughed. "You're going to be very unpopular." "Truth often is." They stood. Yilix extended an arm which Marcus took without hesitation. "You changed my understanding of survivability," Yilix said. "You changed my understanding of how weird aliens can be." As Yilix left, Marcus looked down at his leg. The scar was a thin, pale line now, not elegant, not clean, but it was his. He finished his stew, stood up, and walked out without a limp.